NISMED was not involved in developing the learner's materials and teacher's guide. Its involvement in the national training of trainers was also limited as venue and as facilitators. The training was held at NISMED, and a few of the science staff were invited as facilitators in sessions where selected learning activities were conducted by the participants. Today, NISMED continues to serve as consultant in K-12 science for the Department of Education. KaSaMa Teachers. Among NISMED's initiatives is the KaSaMa Teachers online community composed of Filipino science and math educators. As you already know, the membership is free. KaSaMa Teachers actually supports NISMED's continuing work in K-12 science. There are discussion threads on K-12 science. You can also find links to the learner's materials and teacher's guides, and you can download the latest DepEd issuances on the K-12 program. UP NISMED cannot train all science teachers, but with technology, we can reach many, hence this webinar series. The webinars are free and are aimed to support teachers, schools, divisions, even teacher education institutions in their implementation of the K-12 science curriculum reform. NISMED has partnered with Intel Education for free use of their webinar platform. Participation in the live webinar is actually easy. Teachers just go to the webinar site every fourth Friday at 4 p.m. And if you miss a webinar, the recorded webinar as well as the presentations and documents shared during the webinar are all accessible in KaSaMa Teachers. The discussions and sharing of practices also continue in KaSaMa Teachers. And for the benefit of community members, this slide that you're seeing now points to the discussion threads. The titles have live links, so if you want, you can click on the links and bookmark them. As you can see, the grade 7 science contains overview by the UP NISMED science education specialists. There are also webinars dedicated to the different units. These are presentations led by the writers of the modules. And there are also webinars that contain the sharing of implementation experiences, and these were done by classroom teachers. This takes place in both the grade 7 and the grade 8 science. Today's webinar, so far we have conducted 7 webinars for grade 7 and 6 webinars for grade 8. Today's webinar is webinar number 14 and marks the first webinar for grade 9 science. This webinar on Unit 1 of grade 9 science is a 2-part mini-series in itself that aims to enhance science teachers' competence in the 2 most critical yet challenging features of the K-12 science reform: spiral progression and teaching science through inquiry. In the first webinar today, June 27, the overview of Unit 1, Living Things and Their Environment, will show how the concepts spiral across the 4 grade levels in junior high school. We will also attempt to uncover the connections across the 4 strands within the life science unit. The webinar will also present the scientific inquiry continuum and show how teachers can use it as a practical guide for integrating scientific inquiry in instruction. The second webinar on July 11, that is the second Friday of July, will focus on helping teachers to transform existing classroom activities with limited or low-level inquiry into those that will truly engage students in scientific inquiry. Teachers who attend this webinar will practice using the scientific inquiry continuum to design a variety of inquiry-based learning activities that are mapped to curriculum standards and match student ability. And for today, here is our agenda. The presentation will take up an hour, after which there will be time to address questions raised during the presentation. We strongly encourage everyone to participate by answering the polls and typing in questions and comments. You can use the chat pad for this purpose. Then we end with a survey of your feedback on the webinar and some announcements. So, are we ready? Okay, so as the presentation loads, let me take this opportunity to introduce Michael Anthony Mantala, our resource person. Mike is a science education specialist here at UP NISMED's Biology Education Group. He is a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Biology from UP Los Baños. Before joining NISMED in 2009, Mike taught biology for 10 years at a Philippine Science High School and 2 private science high schools. Mike also worked in 2 review and tutorial centers here in Metro Manila, and in his capacity as tutor handled all science subjects. Mike's current interest involves ICT and its interconnections with science education. Of course, biased to biology education. Mike served as trainer in K-12 National Training of Trainers conducted for grades 7, 8, and 9. Today, he will show us why every science teacher should take by heart how the science concepts are connected and spiral across grade levels and within each unit. He will also introduce us to how we may be able to use the scientific inquiry curriculum as a practical tool and guide for integrating inquiry in teaching. Friends, KaSaMa teachers, let us welcome Mike Mantala. Mike?
Thank you, Ma'am Sal. Thank you for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar series on K-12. We will be covering in the next hour and a half an overview of Unit 1 of Grade 9 Science with emphasis on the connections among concepts across the strands in the life sciences and across grade levels from grades 7 to 10. Ma'am Sal, I guess we're going to show our participants a pop-up question.
Yes. Okay, there you are.
Okay, so here's the question. Which statement below best describes your experience? Okay. You can tick one. Okay, at least one participant says that this is his or her first time to hear about spiral progression, curriculum connections, and learning progression. Okay. Okay, so what we have now are 5 participants who are familiar with the term but do not know how it can influence their tasks as a teacher. 2 participants said that this is their first time to hear about spiral progression, curriculum connections, and learning progression, and 3 participants regularly use the concept of spiral progression or learning progression as, in their preparation of lessons and assessments. Okay, so in this webinar, 2 things would figure prominently. One would be connections, and number 2 would be on the inquiry continuum. Okay, so why connections indeed? Studies have shown that there's a deep-seated link between connections and conceptual understanding. And by connections, we mean, of course, connections between science concepts in everyday life and connections among the different science concepts in a discipline. Now, on this link, it can be argued that the strength of a concept, or one that leads to conceptual understanding, draws from the concept's utility in organizing information and in its connection with other concepts given different contexts. Okay, so this is a table, okay, or this table is an adaptation of DepEd's curriculum guide for science. If you have with you your curriculum guide, you'd probably notice that there are some slight changes in wordings. Okay, so what do you make of this table? Mamsal, I guess we have another pop-up question. Okay, on the first column, you have there the strands for the life sciences. There are 4 strands, actually: parts and function, heredity, and under heredity, there's inheritance and variation, biodiversity and evolution, that's another strand, and ecosystems. And you will find in the different cells under the different grade levels, okay, the columns for the different grade levels, the different concepts that are given out, okay, for the life sciences. Okay, so one participant said that some of the topics were discussed already in the elementary years before the K-12 came out. Okay, another one said that just a limited set of topics per subject area is covered. Okay. The teacher has to adjust to this setup eventually. Progression of topics per grade level, but getting deeper and deeper. Okay. They are related with each other. Okay, very interesting observations. Science is connected diversely. Okay. And on the chat pad, Mavic says that they are of increasing complexity in terms of concepts. Okay, so looking at the table, you would notice that grade 7 starts and ends with the concept of levels of organization. For the parts and function strand, okay, you see the parts and function strand. This concept is confined to the organism level. Okay, so you have the levels of organization at the organism level. This covers the following parts: organism, organ systems, organs, tissues, and cells. Note that we started here with organism. Okay, you can of course start with the cells, but consistent with a key feature of the K-12 curriculum in which we introduce concepts from the macro, the more tangible, to the micro, okay, or to the abstract. For this strand, other than the activity on levels of organization, there's also an activity differentiating plant and animal cells, and another activity introducing organisms other than plant and animals, okay, the unicellular organisms. Okay, so we're still here on parts and function. This activity set the stage on which to introduce towards the latter part of the unit with the ecosystem strand other levels of organization beyond the level of the organism. So you see this part here, levels of organization at the ecosystem level and interaction among parts. Okay, so in a way, this is a concept of level organization unlike what we used to teach as levels of organization in the old curriculum, in which we teach all the different levels from the cell to the biosphere. In fact, other teachers would even start from the subatomic levels. Okay, but we're not going to do that anymore in this grade level. Okay, so for parts and function, we refer to levels of organization at the organism level. Okay, and we level that up when we get to the ecosystem strand for levels of organization at the ecosystem level. Okay. Okay. So this is strand here, ecosystems. Okay, for grade 7 would include the levels of population, community, and ecosystem. These are levels beyond the level of the organism. So that said, an equally important concept, the concept of interaction. So we're not actually just dealing here with levels of organization, but also of interaction among the parts that make up the different levels of organization. Okay, so the concept of interaction should complement any and all discussion on levels of organization. This brings home the message that all these parts work together to enable the organism to survive and to keep the stability of ecosystems. Let me go back meanwhile to that activity I mentioned earlier about organisms other than plants and animals. That's actually the title of the activity, organisms other than plants and animals. Students need to discover through this activity that other organisms need not have the complexity of multicellular organisms, such as plants and animals, to be called organisms. These organisms are cells that are capable of carrying out the different processes of life. Other books would refer to them as single-celled organisms or unicellular organisms. They reproduce asexually either through budding or fission. They do not need specialized sex cells to perpetuate their kind. And this is a property they share with a number of plant species, except using other modes of asexual reproduction. Okay? Okay, so we move now to the heredity strand. Okay. In the heredity strand, they will compare asexual and sexual modes of reproduction. These similarities and differences in the modes of reproduction of different organisms provide a prelude, if you may, to discussions on biodiversity and evolution, in which strand, okay, a survey of different organisms is covered. These organisms may include those that they see in their immediate locality, which they will observe in an activity on ecosystems. Okay, so there's an activity in this strand, the ecosystems strands, in which students will be observing organisms or things in their immediate environment. This is when they note interactions among a variety of organisms and their environment and how these interactions keep the stability of ecosystems. Okay, so that's a brief narrative on the connections among concepts across strands for grade 7. With those connections in mind, how do you think have students been prepared for the concepts in grade 9? Okay? Okay, so you would notice that for the parts and functions strand, okay, so there you go. Kindly just follow my cursor. Okay, my pointer. Okay, so you would notice for the parts and functions strand, grades 8, 9, and 10 all zoomed in on certain organ systems, beginning with the digestive system in grade 8, moving to circulatory and respiratory systems in grade 9, then to the coordinated functions of the reproductive, endocrine, and nervous systems in grade 10. The parts and functions strand in grade 9 is a story, again if you may, of how the nutrients from digested food, which they learned in grade 8, reach and feed the cells that make up an organism through the circulatory system. But of course, food is not all there is for cells to survive or for organisms to survive. Cells also need oxygen to burn, that's in quotation marks, the food that reaches them, and release, again that's in quotation marks, the energy they need to keep going. This is the process of cellular respiration, which they will cover in the ecosystem strand along with photosynthesis. Okay, so there you go. Okay, together these two processes complete the story of bioenergetics or life energy. But before that, okay, so let me just go back to parts and function again. A discussion on respiratory system will show how oxygen enters the body through gas exchange and how it is circulated to the different parts of the body through the circulatory system. So you have here a kind of like spoon and fork relationship between the two organ systems, the circulatory and respiratory system. The parts and function strand of grade 9, and for that matter all the other grade levels too, is a story of survival at the organism level. Okay? The heredity strand of grade 9, and for that matter all the other grade levels too, is a story of survival at the species level. Okay, so again, dito, ang usapin dito ay survival ng mga organismo, ano? Sa level mismo ng organismo as a unit, okay, in the different levels of organization. Tapos pagdating natin dito sa heredity strand, ito naman ay magiging usapin ng mga bagay-bagay na may kinalaman sa pangangailangan at sa mga proseso ng mga organismo na nakapaloob sa species level. Okay? So it's a story of how species perpetuate their kind. But at this grade level, emphasis is on how traits are transmitted through the genes and chromosomes following non-Mendelian inheritance patterns. The foundational concepts and principles used to cover this topic, including the terminologies like alleles, genotypes, and phenotypes, to name a few, are assumed to have already been taken up in grade 8 during their discussion on Mendelian genetics. To belabor the obvious, it's a prerequisite. Okay? Maguguluhan ang ating mga estudyante kung halimbawa mag-umpisa tayo sa non-Mendelian inheritance at wala pa silang kaalam-alam sa kung ano ang mga proseso at mga konsepto na nakapaloob sa Mendelian inheritance. Okay? Now, just a situationer, in grade 8, biology or life sciences is introduced towards the latter part of the year. I think it's introduced in the 4th quarter. And biology in grade 9 is introduced in the 1st quarter. Okay, so here's the situation. Supposedly, there should have been a somewhat seamless transition from grade 8 life science to grade 9 life science. However, we know for a fact that any topic that is placed or that is scheduled towards the latter part of the year compete with a lot of activities scheduled for that part of the year. Okay, like graduation, like JS prom. So one worry is that this part of grade 8 life science, Mendelian inheritance, could no longer be covered in detail. Okay? Importante ho na i-cover natin itong Mendelian inheritance na ito at lahat ng mga konsepto na may kinalaman sa Mendelian inheritance upang mas maliwanag ho natin na may papaunawa sa ating mga estudyante kung ano ang kaibahan ng Mendelian inheritance at saka ang non-Mendelian inheritance. Okay? One more thing, they should have also learned in grade 8 during the topic on cell division cycle, the genetic implications of mitosis and meiosis in grade 7. Okay, so and in grade 7, okay, so this is mitosis and meiosis in grade 8, and in grade 7, during the topic on modes of reproduction, okay, sexual and asexual modes of reproduction, the genetic consequence of sexual and asexual reproduction, okay, which is that sexual reproduction involves sex cells that divide meiotically to produce haploid gametes, and that asexual reproduction involves somatic cells that divide mitotically to produce daughter cells that are identical to the parent cells. Okay, so yeah, that's where we make the connections. As a consequence of which, sexual reproduction leads to genetic variation across generations of offspring. No such thing results from asexual reproduction. These concepts are what the concepts in grade 9 seek to clarify and expound on. Moving on to the biodiversity and evolution strand. Here it is. The concept of variation taken up in the heredity strand is revisited alongside the concept of species adaptation to a changing environment and species extinction. Again, if the parts and functions strand approximates the story of survival at the organism level, and the heredity strand that at the species level, the ecosystem strand approximates the story of survival at the ecosystem level. In grade 9, this strand focuses on life energy. Okay, so there you go. Life energy, which includes photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and how they complement each other. Looking at this strand in grade 8, you get the point of how these concepts have spiraled. Okay, how do you think do these concepts in grade 9 prepare the students for the concepts in grade 10? Okay, paano naman, ano? So nakita natin kung paano magkakawing-kawing itong mga konsepto na ito mula grade 7 patungong grade 9 at kung paano magkakaugnay ang mga konsepto na ito across the strands, the 4 strands in the life sciences. Okay, paano kayo makakatulong itong mga konsepto na ito na kapaloob sa grade 9 upang ihanda ang mga bata sa mga konsepto na kanilang haharapin pagdating nila sa grade 10. Okay. Okay, so there goes one tool. So that's adapted from DepEd's curriculum guide on K-12 science. Okay, Ma'am Sel, we have an advertisement break.
Yes, we have. We have just noted the questions that were posted in the chat. We would like to inform our attendees that there will be a session after all the presentation is done where Mike will attend or respond to your queries. So, paki-standby lang po, no? So, just keep on typing your questions and your comments. Meanwhile, to support what Mike is saying about the connections from grade 7 up until grade 9, I would just like to show the page in KaSaMa Teachers where there are also discussions about the topics in grade 7 and in grade 8, and where we also show the links to the recordings of all the presentations in grade 7 and grade 8, so that teachers who are now handling grade 9 science, you might want to take a look at those materials in KaSaMa Teachers. So let me just pull that in right now. Pakihintay lang po. Right, so this is the slide I've shown earlier. This is a good material for reviewing what your students already learned in grade 7 and in grade 8. And these webinars were conducted by NISMED folks and also by the module writers as well as the teachers. So if you look at the grade 7 science webinars and recordings of these webinars as well as the presentations used by the resource persons, there's one in grade 7 science, and that discussion is called the K-12 science webinars, discuss, share, collaborate here. And in this particular page, you'll find the presentations or the webinars that provide an overview of the K-12 science curriculum as well as an overview of grade 7 science. Both overviews were presented by UP NISMED science education specialists who serve as consultants to DepEd K-12 science. And then there are 4 presentations, one presentation or one webinar focused solely on each unit. So you have 4 units presented, and the lead persons or the resource persons were the writers, those who wrote the modules. and the teacher's guides. And then, aside from these overviews and these module presentations, you also have sharing of implementation experiences. We have invited some of the community members and KaSaMa teachers to share with us their experiences in implementing the activities and in trying out the contents of the teacher's guides in their respective classes in these different units. So we have, I think, about 3 sharing webinars in for grade 7 by our teachers. And then in grade 8 science, we also have a discussion thread, and it's called Grade 8 Science Webinar Resources and Discussions. And if you click the link, it is live, you can bookmark that place in KaSaMa Teachers. Again, this contains an overview of the grade 8 science, and this presentation was made by UP NISMED consultant to DepEd K-12 Science. And then, of course, there are also the 4-unit presentations by the NISMED writers. And again, there are sharings of implementation experiences by classroom teachers. And I think grade 9 science, those of you who have not especially been familiar with the curriculum and how these were implemented in the different classrooms all over the country, you will definitely benefit from these webinars. No? So please find time to go to this page in KaSaMa Teachers and view the webinars. The links are all there. You can download the presentations for your offline viewing also in these pages. So please take advantage of this opportunity and freely share it with your co-teachers. No? Lahat po ito libre at lahat po ito ay serbisyo ng NISMED para sa ating mga science teachers. So please take advantage of these very important resources at KaSaMa Teachers that were provided to us also by UP NISMED. So that's about it, I think, Mike.
Sorry for that. Okay. Another tool that is at our disposal are the learning materials in which we find the activities that we give our students to help them develop the concepts we discussed earlier and for them to make connections between and among these concepts. This is one tool with which there's much we can do to not just inculcate in our students the spiraling progression of concepts, but also to equip them with the necessary inquiry skills, okay, developed through inquiry-oriented teaching practices and materials. At this point, I would just like to mention again that UP NISMED did not write the learning materials and the teaching guides for grade 9 science. Okay, so keeping in mind the connections among concepts we discussed earlier, let's see through this table how many activities are in each of the 4 modules for Unit 1. Okay, the concepts highlighted in the activities and how they help the students achieve the necessary learning competencies. Okay, so this is an abbreviated table. Mamsel, I think we have a PDF version of this, so we can show them what concepts are highlighted in the activities.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, so this is the expanded version. So there are 4 modules for Unit 1. First module is on respiratory and circulatory systems working with other organ systems. There are 10 activities for Module 1. Okay, that includes the enrichment activity. And following here are the concepts that these activities help develop. Okay, so you have there the concept of the different structures that make up the circulatory and respiratory systems and how they work together. Okay, so you also have there the structures of the circulatory system helping in the transport of oxygen and food to the cells, how the structures of the respiratory system help facilitate gas exchange. And there's also this concept of interaction among the different organs that make up the 2 organ systems, the circulatory and respiratory systems, and another concept on how an abuse of the organs of the circulatory and respiratory system would lead to circulatory and respiratory diseases. And there's another concept on the proper ways to care for the organs of the two organ systems. Okay, so these are the concepts, okay, that were developed through the 10 activities for Module 1. And all these would help approximate the attainment of the learning competencies, okay, the two learning competencies for this strand, okay, for this strand of the life sciences. So what are these learning competencies? Explain how the respiratory and circulatory systems work together to transport nutrients, gases, and other molecules to and from the different parts of the body, and infer how one's lifestyle can affect the functioning of the circulatory and respiratory systems. Okay, so that's Module 1, okay, with 10 activities for the first strand. Here's now Module 2 on heredity, inheritance, and variation, the second strand, with 6 activities, okay, and following are the concepts that these 6 activities help develop. Okay, so how traits or characteristics follow non-Mendelian patterns of inheritance, okay, that genes are located in chromosomes and that the DNA is the genetic material. Okay, so there is actually one activity here in which the learners are asked to simulate, or rather not simulate, but to model, okay, the DNA molecule, okay, modeling of the DNA molecule. So I think this has something to do with some cutouts that they use, okay, to make the DNA models. And these activities are supposed to help the students attain these two learning competencies here, to describe the location of genes in chromosomes and to explain the different patterns of non-Mendelian inheritance. And by the way, you might not find this content, okay, in the content standards, that of the DNA as the genetic material, but this activity, I think, is helpful in prepping up or in preparing the students for the concepts of DNA as a genetic material in grade 10. And for the third strand, okay, here's Module 3 on biodiversity and evolution. There are 5 activities for this module, and following are the concepts, okay, that these activities help develop. Biodiversity refers to the variety of life forms in a given area. Limiting factors are environmental conditions that keep the size of populations in check and that keep ecosystems stable. By the way, these key ideas are not exactly worded as they appear in the learning materials. Okay, what I did was to reword them in such a way that we are able to group, to capture, okay, a logical grouping for these ideas. Okay, and carrying capacity is affected by changes in the environment, and human actions have resulted in habitat destruction and accelerated rate of species extinction. Okay, all these activities are intended to help students attain this learning competency here, to relate species extinction to the failure of populations of organisms to adapt to abrupt changes in the environment. Okay, and for Module 4, this is for the last strand, for the 4th strand in the life sciences, ecosystems. We have here activities on life energy. Okay, so there are 6 activities for this module, and here are the ideas, the concepts that these activities help develop. Plants and other chlorophyll-bearing organisms produce their food through photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes place in chloroplasts. In photosynthesis, radiant energy is transformed into chemical energy. Okay, knowledge of photosynthesis helps improve farming practices. Organisms release energy stored in food through cellular respiration, and cellular respiration takes place in mitochondria. Okay, And the learning competency in this strand is this, okay? For students or for learners to be able to differentiate basic features and importance of photosynthesis and respiration. Okay, these are a lot of concepts, okay? Now, I understand that many of our teachers who now teach in grade 9 are chem majors. Is that right? Are chem majors, and for which reason, to a chem teacher, okay, or to a teacher who teaches chemistry or who taught chemistry in the old curriculum, how do you think would they be able to handle concepts like this? Okay, so what help do you think would teachers need to help them implement these lessons more effectively? Okay, so which module are your students working on now? Okay, thank you, Ma'am Sal. Okay, so we're back in the in our old format. Okay, so may I know which module are your students working on now? Have you completed all 10 activities for module 1? On the average, how many activities do you think can your students finish in a given module? So for module 1, we have 10 activities. For the other modules, we have 5 activities. On the average, how many activities do you think can your students finish in a given module? I think a more important question is this. What do you do if you run out of time? Okay, I already see here some questions. What do you do if, for example, you're not able to cover this or that topic that is prerequisite to a topic in a higher grade level? So what do you do? Okay, so what do you do if you run out of time? What would serve as your basis for deciding which activities to cover and which not without sacrificing the needed concepts and learning competencies? So ito ho yung mga palaisipan natin, ano? Okay. Okay, so if conceptual understanding is desirable, okay, kanina nabanggit ho natin tong conceptual understanding, ano? Anyway, so designing inquiry-based lessons helps students to see more clearly the connections among concepts in a discipline and to make the necessary connections themselves given another context or situation. As I've pointed out in my opening statements, this could be instrumental in developing conceptual understanding in students. So if conceptual understanding is desirable, then we turn our classrooms into an environment that fosters inquiry and nurtures inquiry skills beginning with the lessons and activities we plan and implement. But first, a few questions, okay? So, do the students see the big picture in the discipline? For the life sciences, do the students see the big picture? Do they see the story of survival at the organism level, at the species level, at the ecosystem level? Okay, do they have the skills they need to see the big picture? Indeed, what skills do they need to be able to see the big picture? Do they have the desire to make sense of the subject matter? Do they have the ability to solve transfer problems? Dito sa katanungan na ito, maliwanag dapat sa mga estudyante natin itong mga connections na pinag-usapan ho natin kanina, no? Upang makita nila kung paano ang isang konsepto ay magagamit nila sa pagpapaliwanag ng mga bagay-bagay, okay, na ang konseptong yon ay may kinalaman subalit nasa ibang konteksto. Do they have the ability to solve transfer problems? Are the students given the time to acquire conceptual understanding? Okay. So yan po ano, yung mga katanungan ano, na kailangan nating pag-reflectan. Ano? These are the questions we need to reflect on. Okay? To be able to figure out what to do in our classroom setting if we deem conceptual understanding as a goal, ano, in learning. Okay, so kanina nabanggit ho natin ano, na may mga iba't ibang mga activities, okay, na makakatulong sa atin, ng mga guro at sa ating mga estudyante upang mas epektibo na ma-develop ano, sa ating mga estudyante ang mga konsepto sa life science. Okay, so here's a question. How does one improve upon the lessons and activities to effect conceptual understanding? Okay, and by conceptual understanding, we mean one that approximates a high level of intellectual sophistication with the locus of control in the possession of the students. Okay, yung intellectual sophistication po na yun sa locus of control, we'll discuss these two terms later on in detail when we get to the expanded version of the inquiry continuum. Okay, so UP NISMED advocates teaching science through inquiry. Peering at this advocacy through the lens of an inquiry continuum, the teaching of science would then have to span 4 levels: confirmation, structured, guided, and open. Okay? For purposes of this webinar, this inquiry continuum proposed by Banche and Bell in 1998 is what we will be using alongside the expanded version of Wenning. Okay? Okay, so what is confirmation inquiry? In this level of inquiry, the students are given the problem and method, and the outcomes are known in advance. Confirmation inquiry is useful when a part of a lesson's objective is to revisit a previously introduced idea, to introduce conducting investigations to students, or to familiarize the students with a specific inquiry skill such as collecting and recording data. Okay, so that's for confirmation inquiry. What about structured inquiry? In this level of inquiry, the problem and method are still given by the teacher. However, students provide an explanation supported by the evidence they have collected. Okay? What about guided inquiry? In this level of inquiry, a research question is provided by the teacher, while the method to test the research question is designed by the students. The research results will also be explained by the students. This level of inquiry is most useful when students have, in the past, been provided with opportunities to work on researches using different approaches. And in the hierarchy, the highest of which is open inquiry, okay, in this hierarchy, in this continuum. In this level of inquiry, the students are given the opportunity to work on a research question like scientists do. What do scientists do? Okay, they formulate questions, they design and implement investigations, and after which they communicate their results. As this level requires a high degree of scientific reasoning, so it also demands an equally high degree of cognitive demand from the students. Okay? So, in a while, I'm going to introduce to you an activity. I'm going to show you in a while an activity from Module 4. But before that, I think, Mom Cell, we have a pop-up question.
Yes.
Okay, so which type of scientific inquiry is common in your class? Okay. Ayun. 9 participants have or use guided inquiry in their classroom setting. Okay, very nice. Okay. Meron ding structured inquiry.
Mostly guided, no?
Okay, so majority, oh yeah, mostly po guided. Right, right. And then, meron ding structured inquiry. Um, here's now the activity that I would like to show you. Okay, module 4 activities. Okay, well, I mentioned earlier that there are 6 activities in module 4. Okay, these are now the activities. These are actually the titles of the activities in module 4. Structures involved in food making. Okay, investigating the leaf stomata, evidence of photosynthesis, the powerhouse, let us recharge, comparing photosynthesis and respiration. Okay, so you can infer based on these titles that the first 3 activities deal with the process of photosynthesis. The next 2 activities, 4 and 5, deal with cellular respiration, and the 6th and final activity deal with comparing photosynthesis and respiration. Okay, and there should exist a ground in reason for comparing photosynthesis and respiration. They are both processes, okay, in bioenergetics, or that deal with life energy. Okay, activity 3 here is highlighted evidence of photosynthesis. This is the activity I'm going to show you, okay, right now, okay? So activity 3, evidence of photosynthesis. And by the way, there are many parts to this activity, and I actually just chose this part. So, hindi ho ito isang part lang. Isang activity ito, pero meron siyang iba't ibang mga bahagi, at ang kinuha ko ay isang bahagi lamang, ano, just to drive home the point of how to tweak activities for conceptual understanding. Okay? So, this is the activity evidence of photosynthesis, and here's the objective, to show that oxygen is produced by photosynthesis. Okay? In the activity, the materials and the procedure are provided, okay, to the students. Now, based on the descriptions we have for the different levels of inquiry, what level of inquiry do you think is employed for this subpart of activity 3? What do you think? What do you think is the level of inquiry employed here? Okay, so probably some of you would consider this as structured. Okay, si Ma'am Sel, sabi structured. Okay, probably others would consider this as employing the level of confirmation inquiry. Okay. Well, actually, it all depends. Okay, it all depends on whether or not our students have already had a prior knowledge of the outcome of this activity. Okay? Kung alam namin yung outcome, edi confirmation lang siya. Kung hindi, probably structured siya. Okay? Structured inquiry. Okay, knowing your student's ability, what level of inquiry do you think is appropriate to use? Okay? So, kung halimbawa kilala natin ang mga, well, of course, kilala natin ang ating mga estudyante, ang abilidad ng ating mga estudyante. Okay, sa tingin niyo kaya sa activity na ito, yung structured level of inquiry ay appropriate sa kakayanan ng ating mga estudyante? Okay. And how ready are you to modify this activity to carry out a higher level of activity, or an activity, okay, that approximates a higher level of inquiry? Okay, ano ho kaya ang kailangan pa natin? Kailangan ba natin ng tulong para mas confident po tayo na i-modify ang mga activities na nasa ating learning materials upang i-match natin yung kakayanan ng ating mga estudyante sa level ng inquiry, okay, na sa tingin natin ay appropriate sa kanila. Okay, so how do we tweak this activity, okay, to make it, or rather, how do we tweak, or how do we manipulate, modify, or revise this activity such that we elevate it to a level of inquiry, okay, that matches the readiness of our students? Kung halimbawa, i-kokon natin, ano, i-elevate natin sa guided, okay? So, ano ho kaya ang pwede natin gawin? Pwedeng magbigay lang siguro tayo ng isang katanungan, ano? Isang problema, okay? Okay, at pagkatapos, hahayaan natin, ano, ating mga estudyante na magdisenyo ng kapamaraanan upang i-test itong research question nito. Okay? At pagkatapos, ipapaliwanag ng ating mga estudyante yung kanilang mga resulta na nakalap. Okay? So, maaaring ganun ho natin gagawin, ano, ang pagre-revisa natin upang iangat ito sa level ng guided inquiry. Okay? Eh kung halimbawa open inquiry naman po kaya, ano naman ho ang gagawin natin sa open inquiry? Batay sa definition ng open inquiry na banggit ho natin kanina. Okay, maaari siguro na na ibibigay lang natin ang ating mga katanungan. Okay? Tapos, hayaan na lang natin sila na pag-isipan yung katanungan na yon at kung paano nila hahanapan ng kasagutan ang katanungan na iyon. Okay? So, ganun ho natin i-elevate ang inquiry level ng activity nito sa level ng open inquiry. Okay? By the way, to show that oxygen is produced by photosynthesis. Dito sa activity nito, ito, meron ho tayo ditong mga katanungan, okay? What did you see on the leaf, okay? Or on the plant? Anong nakita ninyo? Okay. Dito may makikita silang mga bubbles. Okay? So, yun yung sa Q3, question number 3, no? What do these bubbles indicate? Okay. Nabanggit ko kanina na ito ay series ng mga aktibidades, mga sub-activities. So, dito sa activity na ito, maliwanag na batay sa mga ebidensya na makakalap ng mga estudyante, hindi nila ma-associate yung bubbles na ito sa oxygen. Okay? Hindi pa nila magagawa yon. So, siguro kakailangan pa natin ng isang oxygen para siguro kakailangan pa natin ng iba pang activities para ma-verify ng mga estudyante na yung bubbles nga na nakita nila ay oxygen na produce ng halaman during photosynthesis. Okay? Okay, so something like that. Okay, so kanina pa natin pinag-uusapan itong inquiry continuum na ito. Pero ano nga ba ang itsura ng isang classroom na kung saan ang teacher at ang estudyante ay parehong engaged sa proseso ng inquiry? Okay? Okay, so I would like you to examine this table here on the essential features of inquiry. On the first column are the essential elements of inquiry. Okay? Learner engages in scientific-oriented questions. Learner gives priority to evidence in responding to questions. Learner formulates explanations from evidence. Learner connects explanations with scientific knowledge. Learner communicates and justifies explanations. Okay? On the next 4 columns, these columns here are variations of these elements. Okay? Are you familiar with this table? Okay, are you familiar with this table? Okay, at this point, Mamsel, I think we have a pop-up question. Okay, so here's the pop-up question. Okay, which of these variations are already happening in your class? Ayan. Which of these variations are already happening in your class? Okay, so pakisagot po. Okay, so ano hong nangyayari? Alin ho sa mga variations nito ang nangyayari na no, sa inyong classroom? Are the learners provided with evidence? Okay, or are learners directed toward areas and sources of scientific knowledge?
So you choose the cell or the practice that's already happening in your classrooms, and then you type that into the box, into the text box. Or maybe to shorten it, you can make use of the rows and columns numbers. We start, column 1 is at the top, left, the second column, and the rows will be from the top to the bottom will be 1, rows 1, going down 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then the columns would be proceeding from the second column, that becomes your second column. So as the entry of learner poses a question becomes row 1, column 2. So that's probably a short way to answer. And then we will just read what you've written down or what you've chosen based on the actual cell contents. Will that help?
Yeah.
So we count rows from top to bottom, 1 to 5, and then columns from left to right, 1 to 5 also.
Okay, Ma'am Sel, we now have here 7 answers. Okay, learners formulate.
Akit natin ng konti.
Learners formulate explanations. Is that explanation? Learner. Okay, row 4, column 2. Okay, so learner directed toward areas and sources of scientific knowledge. Okay, that's for 2. Okay, row 4. Learner formulates explanations after summarizing evidence. Okay. Learner given data and told how to analyze. Learner poses a question. Learner given data and asked to analyze. Okay, row 1, column 4. Learner engages in questions provided by the teacher, materials, or other sources. Okay. Let's try to make sense of what these cells and what these variations are in relation to the essential features of inquiry. Okay. So basically, if you notice, as you move from left to right, okay, that's from left to right, from here to here, okay, there's actually an enhanced direction from teacher, okay, or material. Okay, so medyo teacher directed, dito sa rightmost side of the table. And as you move to the left, it gets more, it actually points more now to the self-direction of the learners. Okay, so moving to the left, learners are more self-directed. Okay, to the right, direction is mostly from the teacher and or material. Okay, so from these variations, leveling up is of course moving from right to left. Okay. Okay, so yun po, and this is actually what we want to achieve, in our classroom situation, that our students learn to pose questions, that our students determine, okay, for themselves what evidence to collect and how to collect it, and that they are able to formulate explanations after summarizing evidence, that they are able to examine other resources and forms the links to explanations, and that our students are able to form reasonable and logical arguments in communicating their explanations. Okay? So, ito po yung gusto nating i-achieve sa ating mga estudyante. Okay? Ma'am Sal, I think we have another pop-up question. Okay, so which of these do you want to target for your science class? Okay. At this point in time, okay? At this point in time. We want, of course, our students to get self-directed, okay? Pero at this point in time, well, you know your students better. So, ano ho ang sa tingin ninyo ay pinaka-reasonable na target for your science class? Okay, so someone said row 2, column 2. Row 2, column 2. That's learner directed to collect certain data and told how to collect it. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Learner directed.
Our column counts from left to right is 1 to 5. So, column 2 is really column 2. Row 4, column 4.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Row 2, column 2 means learner determines what evidence to collect and how to collect it. Tama po ba?
To collect
Yung sumagot po niyan, tama po ba?
Or if possible, okay, row 4, column 4. Row 4, column 4. Learner given actual connections. Learner given possible connections. Yun po ba yun? Okay, learner formulates explanations from evidence, right? Okay, Ma'am Sel, we proceed. Okay, thank you po. Okay, so here's an expanded version by Wenning. Okay, this table shows an expanded inquiry continuum that uses intellectual sophistication and locus of control, two terms I mentioned earlier, as basis for differentiating the different inquiry-oriented teaching practices from one another. Okay, of note here actually is the observation that the locus of control shifts from the teacher to the student, moving from left to right along the continuum. Okay? So from left to right along the continuum, the locus of control shifts from the teacher to the student. Okay? Okay, so what does that mean? In discovery learning, that means that in discovery learning, the teacher is in nearly complete control, okay? Whereas in hypothetical inquiry, okay, this level here, the work depends almost entirely upon the student, okay? Okay. Intellectual sophistication, so the second element in this table. Intellectual sophistication increases, okay, from left to right along the continuum. So, yan. There's a hierarchy here of different inquiry-based teaching practices from discovery learning to hypothetical inquiry. And in this hierarchy, discovery learning has the lowest intellectual sophistication, and hypothetical inquiry has the highest level of intellectual sophistication. And as the level of intellectual sophistication increases, the locus of control shifts more to the students. Okay? Okay, so, well, that's actually just about it. Okay? Okay, so, there are actually different skills, you know, that we need to have our students develop before they can eventually get to proceed to this this level of inquiry, okay, hypothetical inquiry. So, ano itong mga skills na kailangan nilang pag-ibayuhin? So, mag-umpisa sila sa mga rudimentary skills, like observing, collecting and recording data, drawing conclusions, and then they level these skills up to basic skills like identifying variables, constructing a table of data, describing relationships between variables, okay, just to name a few, and then improving on those skills further, okay, to advance these skills to integrated skills like identifying problems to investigate, designing and conducting scientific investigations, using technology and math during investigations, and way up to advanced skills, okay, solving complex real-world problems, synthesizing complex hypothetical explanations, establishing empirical laws, and or rather on the basis of evidence and logic and the like. Okay, so it's not automatic, and we cannot actually force upon our students lessons that are of this high level of sophistication if their inquiry skills are still at the rudimentary level. So dapat merong match ng inquiry skills nila at saka yung kagustuhan natin, na iangat ang kanilang intellectual sophistication, okay, through the inquiry continuum. So, kailangan nagmamatch yun. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it might be good to mention. Yes, it might be good to mention at this point that the second part of this mini-series will focus on really practicing about designing or modifying existing activities that will, for the purpose of improving or increasing student self-directedness in terms of conducting scientific inquiry in the classroom. So, yung susunod pong part, ito may background na tayo na binigay si Michael, yung next part natin is we make use of this table, the inquiry continuum, including this expanded version, and then look at some examples of activities that are happening in our classrooms, especially in Unit 1, and then think of ways that we can convert those activities or transform them into the next higher level of scientific inquiry. So, yun po yung gagawin natin next part, no?
For part 2.
Sumali kayo kasi practice po lahat yun, workshop po lahat yun, no? Gagawin natin. Gagamitin natin yung mga natutunan natin ngayon about the continuum to modify activities that we do in class, teacher activities as well as student activities.
Okay, yes ma'am Sal, so in closing, Providing students with opportunities to do science that are structured around and consistent with the different levels of inquiry will develop in them a broad set of inquiry skills. They will need this set of skills to appreciate the importance of scientific investigations in allowing them to deepen further their understanding of science content. The problem we have with inquiry now can be likened to that of a student who has not learned to walk yet, but is made to run, or but who is asked to run. Okay, educators should recognize hierarchies in pedagogical practices and inquiry processes, and use this to really cause learning. Okay, with that, I end my presentation for this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Ma'am Sal.
Yes, maraming salamat for sharing with us these your perspectives on the two of the most challenging of all the key features of the K-12 science curriculum reform. I'm sure that our participants, our attendees today, may need to review this webinar using the recording to really be able to look at this in perspective, no? So medyo malalim-lalim ng konti, at saka it's not our usual webinar presentations where we discuss the different activities and then give them tips on facilitating that in class, no? So right now we're actually putting in perspectives the different activities, the learning activities in class from the point already of improving our teachers' capacities or competencies to understand what it means for concepts to spiral from a lower grade level to a next higher grade level, and then what responsibilities we have as science teachers in ensuring that students are successfully learning the concepts, no? That true conceptual understanding really takes place. So, sanay po tayo na kung ano yung tinuturo natin ngayon, yun lang yung pinag-aaralan natin at itinuturo natin the best way we can, no? Mike's presentation today showed us that while that is good, that may not be enough, because in the end, what we want our students really to understand is the connections that the concepts have with other concepts within the same life science or across the different sciences, no? And to be able to see always things in for our students to always make connections, no? Because the stronger the connections are, the more sure we are that their understandings will be long-lasting, no? I think that's one. The other important thing I think we learned from today's webinar is that it is important that as teachers we are able to know where our students are in terms of readiness or preparedness to do inquiry in our science classrooms, which means that we need to know what skills they possess. At the same time, we need to know which particular activities fit those skills. And in the same, while doing that, we are also thinking of how else we can maximize or optimize the development of this or the higher scale. So, importante po, no, na nakikita natin ano na ang kakayahan nila sa paggagawa ng isang scientific investigation, and then know exactly what they need, what they already possess in terms of skills and practices, and then be able to show them or design for them activities that enable them not just to understand the concepts, but also to develop skills, to develop inquiry skills that they will need in the next higher level, next higher step of their scientific inquiry process. So, importante po, no, that we develop conceptual understanding as well as important scientific inquiry skills. And I think that's very possible when we use the approach of inquiry in our science classes. So again, this topic is not easy. the concepts may not be very strongly understood by us, but the challenge remains. We cannot do K-12 science curriculum reform without spirally understanding by heart the spiral progression, the learning progressions, and teaching science through inquiry. We might just be using the materials, but we might not be teaching with the reform in mind. No? So, ingat-ingat po at pagkakataon na po ito na matutunan natin talaga kung ano yung mga features ng K-12 science reform. So again, I would like to thank Mike, who is doing part 1 of this mini-series with us. And also thank all our participants. They're coming from all over the country, as well as we also have friends who joined us from Bahrain, no? In Philippine school in Bahrain. I have not seen the others introduce themselves, the schools where they come from, and the location. Pero kitang-kita po, meron po tayong mga kaibigan na galing sa Mindanao, no? I know some of them from Mindanao, and we also have earlier people from the Visayas, no? So, again, take advantage of the resources in KaSaMa Teachers, especially these webinars. We have recorded it, so you'll be able to access it also. And we will be notifying all members as soon as the recordings are ready, and Mike's presentation will be made available also to all the attendees as well as to all members of KaSaMa Teachers. Again, maraming salamat, and I hope you still have time to give us your feedback about today's presentation. Let me just load that slide and also share with you some announcements. So please share with us your comments about today's webinar. We really need them to be able to improve our webinars. Right now, I'm loading the page where you should be able to get the link to the survey, the feedback form. And then we would like also that our discussions continue in KaSaMa Teachers. We have run out of time, so the discussions probably, the questions that you've asked, we can do in KaSaMa Teachers, or if you have time. Do we still have time? I think Mike can answer some of the more urgent ones.
Yes, ma'am, for sure. Sure, ma'am.
Yeah, so while you're doing the feedback, let's give Mike time to review the questions and the comments you've posted earlier, and then give him time to address those.
Okay, so let me just browse through. Let me just go over the questions. Okay, so from Christine May, I have a concern. I'm a bit confused. In grade 8, excretory is included. However, when I browsed the LM and TG for grade 8, it could not be found. Okay, in the discussion okay, Christine, you didn't overlook it. Okay. Well, actually, this is how we proceeded, with, or rather, during the TOT, this is how actually I presented the topic, on the digestive system. Okay, so grade 8 actually is the digestive system. During that time, I actually presented an analogy, okay, that of a theater stage, okay, in which the digestive system plays center stage. So all the bright lights are focused on the digestive system, and it's not actually just the excretory system, Christine May, but also the respiratory and the circulatory systems. Okay, so what role do they do? What role do they do in the discussion of the digestive system for grade 8? So in that analogy, these organ systems, the excretory, the circulatory, and the respiratory systems are play accessory roles. So what we have on that stage are actually just dim lights. Okay, so where it could help, Christine May, please incorporate a discussion on the excretory system and how it keeps overall wellness of the body, okay, how it complements the function of the digestive system, okay, something like that, okay. So the idea here, Christine, is that we highlight the role of the digestive system and mention as well to our students how this role of the digestive system concatenates or relates to the role played by the excretory, the circulatory, and the respiratory systems. Okay, so again, on the center stage is the digestive system. Okay, and on the background are the excretory, circulatory, and respiratory systems. The bright light on the digestive system, the dim lights on the three other organ systems. Okay, next question. So basically in grade 9 circulatory system from Jerai, and respiratory will be more of organisms' use of these systems to survive, not the usual parts of the body and functions. What do you mean, Jerai? So basically in grade 9 circulatory will be more of organisms' use of these systems. Actually, grade 9 parts and functions strand focuses on these two organ systems. So from grade 8, where the bright light is focused on the digestive system, the bright light now shifts to these two organ systems, the circulatory and respiratory system, and we discuss them not just as a matter of defining how the organism uses these organ systems, but also in but also on how these organ systems keep the overall wellness of the organisms. Okay, so what if, say for example, the processes of the circulation and respiration go awry? Okay, what if, say for example, the organs of the circulatory system stop being functional? Okay, or those of the respiratory system, what do you think is going to happen to the overall wellness of the organism? Okay, or something along that line, So parang binabanggit ho natin dito yung interaction ng circulatory at ng respiratory system. Nung nasa elementary sila, paisa-isa ito na binabanggit sa kanila, parts of the circulatory system, parts of the respiratory system, these are their functions. But in grade 9, what we do is we look into the interaction among these organs or parts that make up the two organ systems, the circulatory and respiratory systems, and how they relate to the digestive system, the process of digestion in grade 8, and nutrition. And the idea there is that organisms need these organ systems to interact with each other and to work functionally, okay, for the organism to survive. I hope I was able to answer your question, Jerai. Here's another question. Okay. I was not able to cover, from Mamthia, I was not able to cover Mendelian inheritance last year in grade 8, so our grade 9 teacher will find it difficult to teach non-Mendelian inheritance. What would be the remedy for this? Totoo po ito, Mamthia, mahihirapan po talaga. Hindi lang ho ang ating grade 9 teacher, kundi ang ating mga estudyante po sa grade 9. So ang remedyo po dito, balikan ho natin ang Mendelian genetics. At paano ho natin gagawin to? Paano ho natin siya isisingit sa ating mga lessons? Meron ho tayong mga remedial time, gamitin ho natin ito. At pagtuunan natin ng pansin ang pag-discuss ng mga konsepto na sa tingin natin ay mahirap na maunawaan ng mga bata sa Mendelian genetics. Kasi kung mahihirapan sila sa Mendelian genetics, mas lalo po sila mahihirapan sa non-Mendelian genetics without this background on grade 8 genetics. Okay, I hope I was able to answer your question, Ma'am Thea. What else? What else do we have here? In case, okay, so kay Ma'am Dorothy, I think similar yung question ni Ma'am Dorothy. Opo, i-cover po ninyo muna yung grade 8 topics. Gabitin ho natin yung ating mga remedial time. kindly enlighten me about discovery learning. How come it has a low intellectual sophistication? Well, actually ho, low ho siya. Low ang kanyang intellectual sophistication sa level ho ng mga inquiry-oriented teaching practices, okay, or pedagogies. Actually ho, itong mga inquiry-oriented teaching practices po ito, high level na po ito. This is actually a radical departure already from the usual banking concept of education, where the teacher is the depositor, the students the bank. So the teacher deposits information to the students. So it's a radical departure from the banking concept of education. All these now are actually what we call as drawing out pedagogies. Okay, so we draw out from our students the basic knowledge that you want to inculcate in them. But having said that, this labeling, okay, of discovery learning as having the lowest level of intellectual sophistication is actually given by Wenning, okay, the author of the paper and the proponent of this expanded inquiry continuum. And according to Wenning, the focus of discovery learning is not on finding applications for knowledge, but rather on constructing concepts and knowledge from experiences. I think that's his primordial reason for classifying discovery learning as having the lowest level of intellectual sophistication. Okay, I hope I was able to answer your question, Sir Ricky. Okay, ano pa? Ma'am Sel, may mga katanungan po ba ako na na-miss? Had I missed any question?
Well, I think that's about it, no? Mostly,
Okay,
some other questions were answered by other participants as well. In case you missed any,
okay.
we probably will just post them in the discussion page for grade 9 science, no? Especially if the participants who ask them are no longer here. There's another one that this is the last one I saw asking us. This one is from Florence Asinas asking, will you discuss the K-12 grading system next time? We are not fully oriented in that aspect. Sorry po, I was in and out. Well, had to go. Part mini-series, the first part being this, introduction to connections or spiral progression, and an introduction to the scientific inquiry continuum. The second part would be for you to make use of this to modify activities. And then the third part would be what making scientific inquiry happen in the classroom, focusing on environment that fosters scientific inquiry, building up skills in students related to the inquiry. And then the fourth one would have something to do with assessment in an inquiry classroom or an inquiry-based classroom. And then the last part would be something like about technology in an inquiry-based scientific classroom. But our perspective at assessments is not really we don't plan to cover the grading system, the assessment as proposed in the K-12, no? Under K-12. What we want to do is to provide you with some very important foundations about assessment in a science classroom, and probably you can make use of those foundational information or knowledge as a way to make sense of what DepEd proposes as a grading system or as an assessment system, no? Baka mas madali po ninyong maintindihan or mas isaayos yung K-12 grading system after we have shown you the place or the role of assessment in a science classroom. I think you'll be able to put in perspective the grading system after that particular webinar. So if it's okay with you, we'd like to know, will you be interested in a part 3 focus on making scientific inquiry really happen in our classrooms? A part 4 that deals with assessment in a science classroom, in an inquiry-based science classroom. Number 5 would be, the 5th in the series would be technology support for scientific inquiry, teaching. Yon. So if you think that would be good, we will continue with the 5-part series in that case. Okay, so I think now that you've completed the feedback form and we've directed you to the discussion page for the grade 9 science discussions and webinars, this is where you get also the PowerPoint presentation used by Mike today, as well as the link to the recording of this particular webinar. And may I just take this opportunity to again invite you to the second part, which focuses on enhancing scientific inquiry in the classroom by using the inquiry continuum we learned earlier to modify existing teacher and student activities in the classroom. And that's going to take place 2 weeks from now, 2 Fridays from now on July 11, same time, 4 to 5:30, and of course, same website. That's going to be webinar number 15, and our resource person will be Dulce Sebastian, again, of the Biology Education Group, because we're still in Unit 1. And then, may I remind the members of KaSaMa teachers, we need to do the orientation webinar because some people are already repeating questions addressed to us, and we think this is a good time to orient. So please attend the members orientation webinar on July 12. We've set that as on a Saturday because we would like to know if there will be more people available on a weekend in the afternoon for webinars like this, because then it will help us make decisions about schedules of other webinar series that we might be able to run in KaSaMa teachers. So we're experimenting on a Saturday afternoon for the members orientation webinar. Please spread the word and join this webinar. And again, we'd like to invite everyone to the UP NISMED organized international conference in science and mathematics education, which will take place on October 28 to 30. This year. And well, the theme really fits what we're doing right now in the series, in the webinar series. It focuses on implementing curriculum reform, the challenges, the successes, and opportunities that go with it. You can register right now, and you can download the registration form, and the first announcement that you can show to your school heads, including the DepEd advisory that goes with it, and also the CHED memo for our friends in the universities and colleges. And those of you who are interested to present during the conference, you can submit an abstract. Just go to the website of the conference, or you can email us if you have inquiries or concerns. No? So a good place to start on any need for information about the conference and on the downloads would be the website, no? So puntan lang po ninyo yung website ng conference. You get all the information there, you get all the details, including pag nagbayad na po kayo, nag-register na po kayo, lalabas din po yung pangalan ninyo doon, ano, at inyong eskwelahan. So just remember the website, it's ixme at nismed.upd.edu.ph. Okay, and of course, in KaSaMa teachers, please join community conversations related to K-12 science. There are a lot of these conversations going on right now, and you might want to contribute your own experiences, or you might want to echo the same concerns or questions that other community members have posted, no? And again, please don't forget to introduce yourself in the community. Answer the discussion that says, who's in our community, you know? So pwede po ninyong salihan itong mga conversations na ito that are taking place now in KaSaMa Teachers. Okay, so I think that's about it. Under this presentation screen are the links that we have shown. You can again add your name to the attendance sheet if you have not done it yet. Just click on this link and then click on the browse to when the link comes up. And then if you want to jump to the international conference, you can also jump from here, link to it from here. And if you want to know what's going on in UP NISMED, which is the sponsor of our series this afternoon, you can click on the link to the NISMED website. And for those of you who are not yet members of our online community, you can click on the link to KaSaMa Teachers online community and sign up. Earlier, I've seen, I think, one attendee who was asking, paano maging member ng KaSaMa Teachers. Okay, so again, let me take this opportunity to thank Mike Mantala and all our attendees for joining us in this webinar series on K-12 Science sponsored by UP NISMED, again with support from Intel Education. Maraming salamat po and happy weekend everyone. See you on July 11, again at 4 o'clock. At http://engageteachers.adobeconnect.com/KaSaMa Teachers.